Washington opened day 18 with a move no Allied capital anticipated. Trump signed a directive severing all military coordination channels with NATO partners. The decision removed European allies from joint intelligence briefings. It froze satellite data sharing with 14 countries. It ended coordinated naval positioning across the Persian Gulf. This was not a tactical pause. This was a structural rupture. Trump spoke from the Oval Office with Irish Prime Minister Michael Martin present. His tone carried no hesitation. He said America no longer needed or desired Allied assistance. He called NATO's reluctance a very foolish mistake. He said this conflict had been a test and NATO had failed it. The numbers behind those words carry serious weight. America contributes roughly 70% of total NATO defense spending. The alliance has operated under collective defense assumptions since 1949. Trump dissolved that assumption in a single afternoon. But this is where the internal architecture begins to crack. Joseph Kent resigned as director of the National Counterterrorism Center. He did not resign quietly. He posted his statement publicly on social media. He stated that Iran did not pose an imminent threat when operations began. He said the war started because of pressure from Israeli lobbying networks. He had access to the highest classification levels of American intelligence. His resignation was a direct public contradiction of the official war justification. The White House had expected internal discipline to hold. It did not. The financial picture compounded the damage. The administration confirmed daily operational costs at approximately $1 billion. That figure compounds over 18 days into roughly $18 billion. American polling showed consistent public opposition. Citizens were watching prices rise while military spending expanded. $8 billion per day added to an existing cost of living crisis created a political pressure problem with no release valve. What happened next inside Allied capitals stunned Washington planners entirely. European leaders did not issue sympathetic statements. They issued de-escalation demands. Beirut was absorbing Israeli strikes alongside Iranian operations. Lebanese authorities confirmed 912 deaths. Over 1 million civilians had been displaced within Lebanon alone. Europe framed the conflict not as a security victory, but as a humanitarian catastrophe requiring immediate containment. The United Kingdom aligned with that position. So did France. So did Germany. Trump had expected allies to quietly accept their exclusion and wait. Instead, they stepped into independent diplomatic channels. They began coordinating directly with Gulf state governments. The isolation Trump intended to impose on his partners was reversing direction. And then came the development nobody in Washington had fully prepared for. Israeli forces confirmed the killing of Ali Larijani. He was not simply a senior official. He was widely understood as the operational command center of the Iranian government after Supreme Leader Khamenei was assassinated earlier in the conflict. Larijani had chaired Security Council sessions. He had managed the nuclear negotiation posture. He had been handpicked to absorb critical decision-making authority during the crisis. His elimination removed the most pragmatic figure available for post-conflict negotiation. The officials who remain are drawn primarily from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. They are defined institutionally by hostility to the United States and Israel. They do not have Larijani's experience navigating the diplomatic architecture of the Islamic Republic. When this conflict ends, that architecture will need to function. The people capable of operating it are being eliminated one by one. Iran is being left with its hardest elements in charge. That is not a foundation for durable outcomes. Meanwhile, Iraq was deteriorating on its own timeline. Drone and rocket attacks targeted the U.S. Embassy compound in Baghdad. Bystanders captured footage on personal devices. A separate drone struck a hotel used by foreign diplomats. These were coordinated pressure operations on American regional presence extending beyond the primary theater. The humanitarian accounting was becoming impossible to ignore. Over 3,000 people killed inside Iran, according to a U.S.-based human rights organization. At least 206 of those killed were children. The United Nations confirmed 3.2 million people displaced within the country. Lebanon had 912 confirmed dead, with over 1 million displaced. 13 American service members had been killed. The UN Special Rapporteur described this as the most violent period in Iran's recent history. The voices emerging from inside Iran carried a specific quality. They were not expressing support for any foreign military operation. They were expressing exhaustion. They were expressing fear about surviving the next 24 hours. They were expressing fragile hope that the regime might fall on terms that did not require them to absorb the entire cost. That distinction matters enormously for how this conflict can possibly conclude. Trump's NATO break accelerated a realignment already forming beneath the surface. Ukraine sent over 200 technical experts to Gulf countries to assist with Iranian drone defense. President Zelensky addressed the British Parliament and described Iran and Russia as brothers in hatred. That framing was calculated to embed Ukrainian interests into the Western consensus forming around this conflict. The Strait of Hormuz remained closed. Trump had cited reopening the strait as a primary objective, requiring Allied naval support. The allies he expelled from intelligence sharing were the same nations with naval capacity to assist that objective. Separating those two facts created a self-imposed strategic contradiction with no clean resolution. Energy sector representatives understood what sustained Gulf disruption meant for refinery costs. Manufacturing networks that rebuilt supply chains after pandemic disruptions were watching a new disruption consolidate in real time. Insurance markets for regional shipping had moved to levels that made certain routes economically unviable. Washington had entered this conflict expecting speed. It expected the Iranian regime to fracture quickly. It expected allies to provide quiet support while registering formal reservations. It expected the American public to accept a short operation with contained costs. None of those expectations were met on any dimension. The regime was damaged but not collapsed. Allies were conducting independent diplomacy and issuing public criticism. The American public was reading daily casualty figures and billion-dollar price tags and drawing their own conclusions. Day 18 was supposed to be a consolidation moment. Instead, it produced a senior intelligence director's public resignation. It produced a formal rupture with NATO. It produced the elimination of the one Iranian official most capable of negotiating any path toward resolution. 2 weeks ago, Washington thought it was delivering decisive force. Today, it is navigating a strategic environment it did not design and cannot easily reshape. The exit from this situation is not visible from where Washington currently